Today I will walk you through an easy, huge 8-foot workbench build that is really useful and pretty affordable at around $100. To buy a workbench like this would normally cost you over $400, so it'll save you a ton of money. Okay, to start, we need to get some wood for the build. I used construction grade pine that I got from the Home Depot. You will need 20 or 21 2x4x8s, which are about $3.30 as of this recording at my Home Depot. And I also recommend 2 pieces of 1/2 inch, or they call it 15x32, full sheets of 4x8 plywood. These are around $19.50 at Home Depot, so you can kind of make sure you're getting the right one. You can get a little thicker plywood if you want to do 3/4, which I think I did, but you really don't need it. It's just a workbench. Another optional purchase is some pegboard backs. These are $10 a piece, and you would need to buy 2 of them if you want it to look exactly like mine. So that will bring your cost up a little closer to $120, $125 maybe after screws and everything else. Now, personally, I always get Home Depot to cut my plywood for me. They usually do it for free. I think they can charge you, but it's like less than 50 cents a cut. When you're buying the plywood, I recommend doing the same. Just ask them to cut one of the pieces of plywood at 30 inches. This will leave you with a 30 inch by 8 foot piece and an 18 inch by 8 foot piece for the lower shelf. The second piece of plywood is optional. It's for the top shelf, and if you wanted to, you could not do the top shelf at all. I wanted it, so I did it. If you wanted to, you could use scrap wood for the top shelves to save money, but I just got the extra piece of plywood. I figured I'd use the scrap because you just need to ask Home Depot to cut you a 12 inch wide by 8 foot long piece out of this, and the rest of it, the 36 inch by 8 foot that you have left, you can just use for a future project. And it's always good to have some extra plywood around for random projects down the road. Okay, you're also going to need a bunch of screws. I recommend 3-inch screws if you can, but you can also use 2.5 inch pocket screws or just 2.5 inch screws. You want self-tapping screws if you can find them. Spax is a brand I use often. Craig screws. These are all brands that are pretty common and work well. Now, normally I would have you cut the wood at each step, but this time we're going to pre-cut all the boards so that we don't waste as much wood. I find that if you do cut as the steps come, you end up wasting some 2x4s because you don't cut at the right order and you end up, messing things up. So here's the cuts I recommend you make. To start, the easiest cuts are the no cuts. So set 4 of your 2x4x8s aside. We're going to use them at full length, so they don't need to be cut at all. Okay, now take 4 of your 2x4s and cut them at 71 7/8 inches. After that, set the leftovers from those cuts aside. You can see me set them right on the ground next to me because we're going to use them in a second. And like I said, you want 4 of those at 71 7/8 inches. Okay, set those aside and then cut 4 2x4s at 92 7/8 inches. Set those aside as well. These are almost the full board. I think the boards are 96 inches and you're cutting them at 92 7/8, so the leftovers here are going to be very tiny. Scrap wood for the fire, probably. And you can see that I'm setting up a stop for all my cuts when I'm cutting boards. They make really fancy stop systems that you can pay hundreds of dollars for. I just use a piece of scrap wood and a clamp, and I kind of just move the piece of wood so it stops, the piece of wood before it gets too long. And it makes it so you don't have to measure each time. You just measure really well the first time, and then you can just push all the other ones up against the stop, and they're all going to match. And that's one of the most important parts. Okay, now you're going to need 4 2x4s at 32 inches, and that's basically just one 2x4 cut into thirds because 32 times 3 is 96. And then cut out the 4th one out of a new board. So it's 4 total 32-inch 2x4s. Then cut out 4 2x4s at 27 inches. You can use the leftover from that 32-inch cut and then a new board for the rest. Then you're going to need to do 6 24-inch boards. But wait, you already have 4 of them from the first cut you did, that 71 7/8. Well, you already have 4 24-inch boards sitting aside right next to my leg. So you only need 2 more. So 2 more 24-inch boards. So you take those 6 24 inches and set them aside. Finally, cut out 6 15 inchers and 7 9 inchers. So basically now you have a bunch of wood up against the wall like I do, or on the ground. You will notice I have more wood than you. The reason for this is because I actually built 2 of these workbenches because I wanted to cover that whole side of my garage with workbenches. So I have twice the amount of everything. So this was actually kind of an expensive and exhausting project. But we're just going to go over how to build one because I don't think most people would want 16 feet of workbench. I did because I'm, crazy. Whew, that was a lot of cutting. So let's move on to assembling. To assemble this, let's start off by assembling the work surface and the lower shelf, the frames for them at least. To do this, we're going to need to go ahead and grab 2 of the 92 and 7/8 inch boards. Remember, you have 4 of them. And 2 of your 27 inch boards. Again, you have 4 of these. If you have a pocket hole jig, you can do what I did and put pocket holes on both sides of the 92 inch boards and use pocket hole screws to attach them to the 27 inch end rims like I'm doing here. If you want, you can just screw some 3-inch screws through the boards as well instead of using pocket screws. Once you have this rectangle assembled like I have, you can lay it flat and grab your 24-inch 2x4s and space them out evenly. We had 6 of them, so space them out evenly in between the rectangle. Then attach these to the rectangle with 2.5 or 3-inch screws like I did here. I was using the Craig screws, but it's kind of annoying because they don't tap that well if they don't have the Craig holes. So if you have some actual self-tapping screws, they're going to work a little better. Once you have that assembled, set it aside and grab your other 2 92 and 7/8 inch boards and your other 2 27-inch end rims. Go ahead and repeat the process with the pocket holes or just with normal screws and attach the end rims. Here's the trick though. With this one, we don't want it to be the full width rectangle. In between the 2 long boards, we're going to actually use 15-inch boards. Remember, you cut out a bunch of 15-inchers. So go ahead and use the 15-inch 2x4 pieces that you cut earlier and set them between the 2 long boards. Use these 15-inch boards as a guide for where the 27-inch boards should attach like I'm doing here. Go ahead and attach the 27-inch boards with screws. I use pocket screws. And then proceed to attach the 15-inch boards in the middle. Now remember, 15-inch boards should be hitting both sides of the long boards because you use them to set up the size and the width and the distance and all that stuff. If you're following along at this point, you should have these 2 frames like I have, the bottom shelf frame and the top shelf frame. Now, lay your larger frame down flat on the ground and add the legs. The legs are the 32-inch 2x4s that you cut earlier. This is quite simple. Just do your best to work on a flat surface so that your legs are all level. If you do not do it perfect, don't worry too much because you can just use shims later and use a level and make sure everything's level. The legs just get attached at the corners as if you were building a wooden gazelle. Great analogy, right? Just use some more pocket hole screws or normal self-tapping screws to attach these through the sides of the boards. You can now flip over the bench and attach your lower shelf. To do this, just pick how high you want it off the ground and mark that measurement on all 4 legs so that you can make sure the shelf is level. I did 8 inches off the ground for my lower shelf, so I marked 8 inches on each leg and used screws from the outside in to attach the lower shelf. Now, the next step is super simple. If you had Home Depot or Lowe's cut your plywood for you. Just grab the pre-cut plywood and install it with some screws. I actually used some shorter decking screws I had. I think they were 1.5 inches. I figured to use them up because I have them, and I'm not doing any decking anytime soon. But you can use the same screws you used before, the Craig screws or the Spax, whatever you're using. You can just screw them down in. If you didn't pre-cut your plywood at Home Depot, then this would be where you go ahead and cut it, and just use the measurements I mentioned earlier in the video. So also make sure that you flush up the sides of it with the sides of the 2x4 so that it's all even. So basically, you could stop here if you want. You have a workbench, it's assembled, you can work on it. Now, I wanted to go a little further, so I did a top shelf, but that's totally optional. If you're trying to save money, you can skip that. So, if you do want to proceed, let's keep going. We're going to build the top shelf in a similar way. And actually, I use the work surface that I had just built because why not? So, grab 2 of your full-length 2x4s and lay them flat on your surface. Then grab the 7 9-inch 2x4s that you cut out earlier. Space them out evenly between the long boards. With your 9-inch boards, make sure 2 of them are flush with the end of the long boards, and then just evenly space the rest throughout the middle. Now, I did this next part in the wrong order, and I suggest adding the plywood to this frame piece that we just built now before you attach these long legs. But I actually attached the legs first, so let's just follow along with me. The legs are 71 1/8 inches. So remember, we cut those earlier. Go grab those and attach them with screws through the side like I did. You will use all 4 boards for this, all 4 of the 71-inch boards that we cut earlier for this. So I went ahead and attached these, and then I had to actually attach the shelf plywood now with the legs already installed, so I ended up using a ladder, but I figured it out in the end, no worries. Once you have that all assembled, you can go ahead and attach it to the workbench. Just make sure that you should have the back of the workbench flush with the back of the top shelf boards. To attach, just use the same screws through the side, like I said before. Last step is the pegboard. For this, just grab your last 2 full-size 2x4x8s and attach one to the back of the workbench straight down on the surface by screwing it from the top. And then attach the second one at around 22 inches from the top. If you want, you can just use the pegboard, put it up against it, and kind of measure out where you want the top one. Basically, you're going to use these 2 boards to attach the pegboard if you decide to do that. To attach these, you can just use screws. I had some extra wood, so I cut a 2x4 and used it as a centerpiece to add some more support for my pegboards, but this is totally optional as well. And again, to attach the pegboards to these backer boards, just use any old screws that you have. Okay, so here we go. The workbench is done. I pushed it up against the wall, mounted some of my tools on it. It's not perfect yet, but it's still a work in progress. Like I said, I built 2 and put them next to each other. That's why mine looks enormous. You can do this as well. Just double everything and just put them next to each other. Yeah, I'm happy with how it came out. I'm really excited about it, and I hope you guys were able to follow along and, can make your own workbench. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Go ahead and also subscribe to the channel. I'll keep posting tutorials as time goes on. And if you can, just drop a like as well. Thank you.